it's Steven again. Welcome to another one of our crafting videos. Still got my foam. You'll notice that it's a little bit smaller than it was the other day, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Again, this is part of our Dungeons & Dragons program that has been brought to you by PLAN, the Panhandle Library Access Network, and their innovation grants. Thank you again to them. So, what are we doing? I don't remember. We're doing something with foam. We made something. We made some trees. So now we got to figure out what to do with said trees, and that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be taking this foam and making it into a piece of land to put our trees into, and we have a couple different ways to do it. We can either go at it with a razor blade knife. I'd prefer a longer blade, but this is the one I brought with me today, so don't judge me. Or we can work with a hot wire knife or hot wire cutter. And this is what I'm really going to be working with, but I just kind of wanted to show you that you could do it in multiple different ways, depending on what you have available. They will come out dramatically different depending on what you do. The knife is going to give us a much more rougher cut. The wire cutter will give us a much more smooth cut, but we'll show you what happens with both. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our piece of foam, and with the razor cutter, what I like to do is kind of plot out what we're going to be cutting, just so I have an idea of where I need to work and where I don't need to work, because it's more complex to cut this than it is with the hot wire cutter, and gives me a little more freedom to work with. So what I've done is I've drawn a little diagram of what I think my land is going to look like, and from there I'm going to slice in just a nice quick cut here, watching to make sure I do not have my fingers anywhere near the razor blade, because you know razor blades are sharp. Always work with a sharp one, because sharp ones you at least know to keep your hands away from. Dull ones, your people like to think that, oh, that's not going to cut me, it's super dull, and those are the ones that get you. They'll both get you, don't get me wrong. But people get a little bit crazier when it's a dull blade, because they think it's not going to hurt them. And what I'm doing is just cutting it in, and I'll spread it a little bit more as I work with it to give it a little bit deeper cut, and that's why I like a longer blade, and I'm trying to keep it. And see, this is what I'm talking about, what's a little rougher. You can see how that blade will cause it to more scrape than just that's like a smooth cut. Okay, so what we have here is I have cut that out, and now I'm just going to kind of work on it and just take out chunks of it to kind of get where I want it to. And I'm going to break it off with my finger some, because I want a little bit of roughness to it, because smooth edges, they just don't look as good on the board. So we're just going to work with it some. And see, this is where I'm talking about getting a little bit of roughness to it, and that's fine, because I'm going to make it even worse as we go along. But it's just a little bit of a cut, and I'm doing long. I've tried to get it as flat as I can, because that way it cuts it a little bit smoother instead of that tip, because the tip will, see how that does that? Tip will drag right there, and we don't want that. Whereas if you get it a little bit longer, it's more of a razor cut as opposed to a razor drag. And a long blade utility knife would really work wonders here, but somebody took it home and left it at home. Won't mention his name, because he's a fairly decent guy, and I don't blame him for it. It may or may not be me. But here we are. So we do what we can to make the stuff happen. And there we go. Let's just, I don't like that piece. And we're almost done. And what I'm doing is basically just trying to get all the straight edges and get a little design to it as I go along, because we want it to look unique. We want it to look not manufactured. And I could have probably left those on, but in result, got a little piece of board here. You can see that it's roughly in the shape that I had it. I got these extra pieces that I'm not going to get rid of, because I can use these for pieces of rubble and rocks we'll save those for later. But I'm not quite happy with this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just kind of cut into it like this and then twist to kind of give it some more roughness, some unique, and I'm gonna do it at opposite angles. And it's just a flick. When I say opposite angles, I'm gonna turn it upside down so I'm not flicking toward me, but just cutting in and popping to kind of give it some character, we'll call it. And why I'm doing that is because you don't see just uniform cuts in nature. And I can just drag some, because dragging here won't be a bother. But we'll call that rough enough right here. You can see that it's got some lines, some cracks, kind of like rocky faces all over it. That will give it that unique kind of look to it. And I'm just gonna flick a little bit more there because I didn't like that edge. And it's all how you want to like it. That's the trick here. You don't have to be perfect on any of these. Just do it until you're happy. Now, you saw how much work that was, right? It's not hard, but it's time consuming, and especially when you're using the wrong thing. So, longer utility blade would have worked wonders on that. So, I got that one here, but here's what I really like. When I say we're going to try something else, hot wire cutter. So, this little wire right here, you might not be able to see it, but there's a wire right there. Ding, ding, ding. And when I turn it on, that's going to heat up. And when that does that, as I said in that previous video, butter. So much butter. And we're just going to, let's see, what do we want to do? I could draw a design on this too. I'm going to turn this off so I can set it down here for a moment and not just leave something hot. But we're going to make a bigger one. Let's see here. We want to go... It's not a complex design, right? I don't know if you can see that or not. But there you go. Here's the beauty of it. Ready? Power this thing up. Watch this. You're going to love it. Well, already cut in there. But bam. Look at that. See, I'm following that line exactly. Well, almost exactly, except when I look up at the camera. But it doesn't matter, because even a little nudge like that just gives it a little more character, as I said. Now, it does generate a little bit of some fumes, some smells, but you see the difference here? I mean, look how smooth that cut, because it is literally burning this foam right in two. And like I said, we'll put that to the side. We'll do some other stuff with it. But do you see how close to my line it kind of did there? It makes it a little bit easier to work with, and you saw how little I was struggling there to kind of get that going. And like I said, what I'm trying to do is just give it a little bit of natural line to it. Oh. And there we ran into the first problem with a handheld cutter like this. I can only go so far before I have to go with a different one. So let's pick up over here. Let's see how far I can get with this one. And I'll come this direction, which means I can get all the way through. At least I hope. Might be a little thick right up there. We'll find out. Yep. Almost, almost, almost. Almost. Bam. Cutting into it. That's all right. Again, character. So, we've got our piece of wood here. I don't like that end. Guess what? Gone. Gone. Now, that's still hot. You don't want to touch that, but you're going to have to pry some of these pieces off. But you see, I've got it here, and it's not roughed up like this because I'm not going to rough it up the same way that I did this one. What I'm going to do here is I got a couple different options. And what I think I want to do is to take these 90-degree curves off. I want to give it a little bit of slope here. So we're going to come in and just let my imagination work with me here. and bam. And I might do a little bit of the same here. And I'm wanting to give like a little bit of flatness to it, just because if you're going to have miniatures on here, you want them to be able to stand up. And if it's too sharp, they're going to fall. If there's, like this little nudge, see if you can see that little nudge right here that I'm about to lose. I just want him gone just in case. And they'll stick to you, see? There we go. Just to give that miniature a little bit more space to sit on. And I'm going to keep on just touching up in various places of getting these lines. And depending on how deep I come in with that wire, you see, I can go further. We just want to make sure we leave enough depth of foam here to make sure that we have a place to put our actual trees. Okay? So, let me just, I'm going to nudge this in some. See, I'm doing that same thing I did on the other one. But you see how much easier and quicker that is? And still give it some of that what I'll call a rocky cropping to get rid of these curved, flat 90-degree cuts there. And just maybe one right there. A little bit of something right there. Little nudge. Let's go this way some. And I don't like the way that one looks, so let's just touch that up. Because it just looked like very much a sharp cut, and I didn't like that. But we're going to call this one. And yes, we do have that little gap right there where I nudged in, but it won't matter. It'll get covered up. You'll never see it, and nobody will ever know. As Bob Ross would say, it's a happy little accident. We'll make it into something beautiful here and go from there. Well, first, we want to paint it. We want to prime it. We want to kind of seal it so that if something, because you can see that, I'm doing that, right? You can see the little fingerprint or fingernail marks in there. I'm going to put something over it that's going to keep it a little bit more, build a little strength to it. But it's also going to give us a priming base. If I tended to come back with a spray on it, it would protect it from that. And what I'm going to use to do that is a mix of, you can tell from the label here, it would say Mod Podge, but this bottle, it's seen some better days. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Mod Podge, and I'm going to just mix it with some black paint. The black is a standard color that we're going to use for primers. It doesn't have to be black. This is ground we're working with. You know what would also work really well? A brown would work. Black seems to be the tendency, and a shout out to Black Magic Craft out there. I'm not sure if he developed it or if he's just the guy that's marketed it, but it's called Black Magic Craft paint sometimes, so this is what it is. It's just Mod Podge, it's just paint. You mix it in till you get a nice dark color to it. There's not really a whole lot of science to it other than you pour it till you're happy. The glue is going to stay. All you're doing is making it a little less gluey with the paint. But it'll provide a seal, and that's fine. But again, you could go green if you were doing something that you might want to have an undercoat of green. Black is just a general good one. Just pour the black directly into a somewhat used Mod Podge bottle, just because it gives me something to shake with. I can seal it that way. I don't have to be exact with how much I need at any given moment. I just have it saved, and then we go with it. Okay? So I said I'd like to put it in that Mod Podge jar, but that unfortunately is a new Mod Podge jar. And so what I'm not going to be using a whole lot here right now, so I just kind of poured some into a solo cup, and like I said, I like it in that jar because I don't have to measure as much and I won't have waste. I'm going to end up wasting a bunch of this right here. But you can see down there in the cup, I've got some Mod Podge. It's essentially just a proprietary blend of white glue. You could use white glue for this. Mod Podge just has some extra sealing stuff in there that makes it more geared to what I'd like right now. And what I'm going to do is going to take that black paint and just go neat, neat, and then I'm just going to stir. And as you can see, we went from white to black. And it's not completely black either. You can see it's going to have like a little gray tendency. I could make it darker if I really wanted to, just squeeze more paint in there. But I don't need to. I don't want to. I'm happy. This stuff washes off fairly easy because it's just glue. It's water-soluble glue and paint. Water-soluble paint. So I didn't need this, but why not? Got a paintbrush I don't care about. You can see this paintbrush has seen better days. I just don't care about this brush, but I'm going to use it because you don't want to use your good brushes with glue. Glue will stay. It's glue. Makes sense, right? So, my thing, bacow. A little bit of that on there, and then we're just going to slather it on. And now you can see why that glove comes in handy because I'm not really concerned about where I'm touching at this stage. And we're just coming around the sides here as well. We want to get all those little crannies and nooks, all the little rock alcoves. And the trick here is I try not to get as much on the bottom just because that's where we're going to be laying it to dry. And if we're putting it on newspaper, it will pull up that newspaper because it's glue. It's going to glue to that paper. So I try to get as few of it on the bottom as I can, but we got some on there. We'll live. And I'm just touching up anywhere I see pink. I'm there. And so, bam. While we're here, we're going to paint this one as well, just because I made the mess, I made the stuff, let's make it. And you can see how much easier it is to get into those little areas there. I didn't have to spend a lot of time. See, it's just, and that's the joy of a smooth cut versus a jagged cut. Both work. You don't have to spend money if you don't need to. That's the joy of this hobby. You can do it with budget items. But if you want to do more, you want to do faster, you want to do different, you can drop a little bit of money. Hot wire cutter I think was like 15 bucks. It's not the best one. There are better. You will probably see a better one later on in some of these videos. There are ones that are more precise. But what I was saying, yes, this hot wire cutter, it's basic. It does what it needs to do. There are better ones that have temperature settings on it, so you can do faster cuts, you can do slower cuts, you can do more things with them based on what it is. Kind of like glue guns, or hot glue guns. You can have a high temp or a low temp glue gun, and one that does both is kind of handy because it lets you do various things. So, I got these soaking in paint. We're going to let those dry for a little bit, and then we're going to come back and do something with it. How's that sound? You remember when I told you that those things will, if you glue the bottom, they'll stick a little bit? I can show you exactly what I mean right here, right now, because this popsicle, all I did was stir it, correct? And you can already see that it's pulling up newspaper. So when you leave those ones drying, if you got stuff on the bottom, you're obviously you want to pry them up a little bit so that they can be rearranged and placed in a place where they aren't sticking as much as they first were. And we'll do that probably a couple more times. Those are flat. There's nothing to them. They don't have to be. Got some rocks, got some little bit of gravel. What we can do is we can take a little bit of glue, just plain Elmer's glue, and I've got these things, these little pebbles just stuck into little drops of glue. I brushed some glue right here where I put these grains of pebbles on here. It's just ballast from a model train kind of thing. And what that'll do is that gives us some texture. I'll then put that Mod Podge on top of it. That'll seal it in. That'll make it stick a little bit more because it's basically just gluing the stuff into the thing. And you can see I took my glove off and I regret it already. Smaller brushes are better for detail work like this, but this is the one I've got right now. And I'm going to blow, because some air will move it around some. If I had an airbrush, that would be perfect right there. Just move it around. And you can see this is one that I didn't do with a hot wire cutter. This is one that I did with that razor knife. So you can see all the various jaggedness to it. As you're brushing this, I'm brushing probably a little harder than I need to, and I'm pulling some of that little ballast off. But we're getting there. And do it in layers too. You don't have to do thick coats all at once. You can do multiple layers, and that'll make it a little easier to apply. You'll see places that you missed. Why it pays to, if you ever watch the modelers on YouTube, and there are hundreds of them. I'm just some schmuck at the library doing this, but there are other people that are getting paid big money to do this stuff, and they get all kinds of free promotional gifts and stuff like that. Feel free to do that if you want to. I'm not going to argue, but they will always, one of the things that they used to promote before they got big with the people sending them terrain pieces to promote, is a lot of them talked about Audible or a library or a downloadable book. And hey, you know what? I don't have to talk about Audible. I can talk about the library. While I'm doing this, I can sit here, I can be listening to an audiobook, I could be just enjoying the next chapter of whatever, just being distracted, because this isn't anything that takes a lot of mental energy. This is just mind-numbing work. And normally if I'm doing this, it's not going to be just one piece at a time. It's going to be just a good chunk, because I'm wanting to do several pieces at once. Okay? And so I can spend some time just doing that and get through. Look, do you see any pink? I don't see any pink, so we're going to call that done. But you see now I've got some rocks and stuff here to give it some more terrain-y type, some more natural thing looks that we'll go back and paint over, and we will see how that turns out later. These ones are slightly thinner because depending on how thick you go, you can create different layers of terrain. I just wanted it a little bit smaller in these ones, so that's what I did, is cut some that are smaller, that'll hold just one tree, and just made them a little bit thinner. But you can see, it's just a black piece of board here. Yeah, there's nothing special about that, Stephen. Why are you showing me just a black piece of board? Because I'm going to show you what we're going to do with it next. I'm going to use just some everyday Elmer's glue here. This particular bottle is a little old for me, so I've got to work on it to get the cap unstick, but I'm filming, time constraint. So I'm just pouring a little in my paint dish. And what we're going to do is we're going to just take a paintbrush. We're going to go a little bit wider to save some time. Let's go with, this looks like a good one. And we're just going to spread it on here some. And we want it to be a little bit thick, and we're going to work in small areas. Remember this stuff? I do. It makes a big mess. We're just going to use a little bit of a green for the first base here. Grass, it's not always the same color though, is it? So I like to use 2 different colors, and I'll come back with a second color and we'll just play with it some. But this particular shaker, yes, shaker, bam. So I'm just gonna, we're just gonna give it a little bit of a thing. And I kind of know where my tree is gonna be because I already put my holes. You may not have seen them in there because they blended in. But that's what I'm gonna do. Just put a little bit of this. What's that? Why am I dipping in my hand? Because I'm gonna Emerald Lagasse over here and just kind of get some on the side here. Bam, bam. And I got some more over here I can touch up. And that's it. We're just gonna let that, and that'll sit there for a little bit. And where you see the white, it'll dry clear. We're good. And then I'll come back with a little bit of a spray bottle of water and glue and seal it in, and maybe add a little bit of a different color in there. But that's where we're going to start with that one. This one, what do we want to do here? Where's my glue? There's my glue. What do you think? Just solid grass again? I think so too. Keep it simple. And that's way too much glue, but that's all right. I got multiple ones here. We'll fix it. When I'm doing this stuff, for the most part, if you're making terrain, you just kind of want to keep it universal so it can be reused over and over again. If you make a specialty piece, it's only going to be good for that one particular thing, whereas if you just do generic trees, you can use those generic trees over and over again. Over and over again, and that's well worth your time, isn't it? Whereas if it was just one unique piece, you're only going to get to use it once, maybe twice, but still. That's why we want to work with kind of doing it a standard base. We've let these dry overnight, and you can see that the green stuff, it stays on to quick tabs, but if I were to scrape my finger across it, it would definitely come off because I haven't sealed it real good. What I'm going to do real quick is, because these are kind of one color, I'm going to just sprinkle a little bit of other stuff on it. And what I'll do is I'll take a spray bottle here, and I've put some PVA glue, Elmer glue, white glue, whatever you want to call it, and some water just to kind of give it a mixture, and we'll just spray it right on there. And what that does is that gives it some soaking, and it'll seal it up. But I can also now take a couple different colors, and what this is just a mix of different color turf, a little bit of green, a little bit of yellow, because if you look at your yard, it doesn't all just have one color, does it? It kind of does a mixture of colors from dead grass or sun hitting different things, and that's just basically what we're trying to accomplish here, is just give it a little sealing and give it some flavor to it. And that'll take a little bit to dry. But what are we going to do with these things? I'm just going to use a sharp pokey thing. If I had another skewer, I would do that. Actually, I already have a hole in it. I just missed it. Look at that. So we're just going to widen it a little bit. And pull that out. See how we can, I don't know if you can see that hole right there or not, but I think you can. And we're going to take a tree that we've already made. You remember this guy? In the previous video with this tree, I had just given it a spray with sealant. I went back and coated it with a little bit of the water and glue mixture. I gave it probably about 3 different applications, and what that does is that gives it some stiffness to it. You don't want to squeeze it like you're trying to crush it, but you do have some stiffness to it that'll make it easier so that I can bounce it around a little bit and it's not going to come apart. Whereas if I hadn't done that, and like for example, this one I haven't hit with the glue yet, right? And you can see when I do that, things fall off. So that's the difference between the two. Got our little piece of land, and with these normal trees, let's actually go for a smaller one because that's a lot of land. That's a lot of tree for a little bit of land. And I've made some smaller guys, dramatically smaller. And we're just gonna attach it right there. What do you think? I think that's a good spot for it. So I am going to take just standard white glue and put a dab right in there. And then I am going to insert that in there. So we have a tree and a base. That's what that's the essential of a forest kind of scattered terrain. We have a tree that can provide some depth upward. We got the base that keeps it there and makes it movable, so I'm not just trying to figure out a way to stand this tree up. It's got enough space here that if I want to put something on it, I can. And what I'll do after this is I will go in and I'll put a little bit of glue right underneath that tree to give it just some character, maybe a little bit of sprinkling of rocks or debris or something that'll give it just a little bit more life to make it a little bit less generic. And you can also mix that water and glue with a little bit of dishwashing soap or a little bit of just like a drop, or some alcohol, and that'll help it seep in a little bit more, give it a little bit more spreading room. But that second layer of wet watered down glue helps create a protective seal over all the stuff that I've put on there, which will make it a little bit more tough, kind of like when I was showing you that tree, how it gave it a little bit more stiffness. It makes it more wear and tearable on your terrain, on your playability. If we just have it without that, it works. It does. But this is stuff that in theory should see a lot of use. So the more I can protect it for the long run, the longer it will last. And you can see I've got a bit of a mess here, and I'm not just going to get rid of this stuff. That's why I have this container that had mixed things. They all come generally in either a dark green or a slightly brighter green or a medium greens or whatever. And as I use them, I have leftovers like this tray full of terrain, flocking, whatever you want to call it. And I just want to get the most bang for my buck. Mix that in. And now I've added just a little bit more color in there, so that next time I've got my pre-arranged bits. So when I have enough of this, if I don't want to do little bits of pieces of each one of them, I've got this to work with, and that'll be already pre-mixed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of glue, just a touch, and I'm going to, I'll just do it with my finger because I'm feeling lazy and don't want to find a brush right now. Just a little touch there. And what we've been using mostly is this dusty kind of terrain grass, but they make other stuff. And what this is this is what they call static grass. This is 7mm light green static grass that I've got in that bag. I've got another bag in here that is 4mm darker green, medium green is what they call it right there. But either way, I've got them both mixed because I've used this before. There's a mix in there. And this is a static grass shaker. And I don't know if you can see on that lid there, but there's little strands there. That's the little static grass. And what it does is There's different ways to apply this. This is the cheapened version, and I'm just shaking it on there. And it kind of gives it a longer grass feel. You can get expensive versions of this particular bottle, and what it is because, as the name implies, it's static. It works based on electricity. So you'll plug that in, it'll generate a charge, you'll connect it right to the terrain board here, and it'll statically charge the grass to stand up, kind of like, you know, real grass and weeds would. That stands up a little bit taller than just that flocking would, and you just play with it. You do how you want to. I've got a couple weeds here, maybe. I'll put some more around in other places and just work with it, and then I'll do the same thing with these, and you can kind of see how that looks in my hand there. And it's just little flakes. And if I didn't have this shaker, you know what I would do? I'll show you what I would do, actually. Let's do it here. We're going to make another little tuft right there. And maybe in a future video, I'll do some pre-mades of these. Get some wax paper and just put some dollops of glue. And then just kind of, I'm just sprinkling it on there. And that's a little much, so that's fine. Most of that will come off anyway. But you can make little dollops of static grass and then peel them off and just glue them where you want to. And another way I can get, once that's a little bit dry, that I can get that to stand up is same way you'd get your hair to stand up. Comb. And you'll just kind of touch it up and spruce it, but I want to wait till that's dry. And we'll give that a little bit. But we got a tree, we got grass, we got a base. We'll have some forest terrain that we've made. So what are we going to do next? I mean, we got a tree, we got a base. What the heck are we using these things for? What if next time we actually start showing you layout of terrain and maybe paint a miniature to put on with it? Till then, stay crafty.